Hello and welcome to Library Drawing Party. Today we're going to be drawing this beautiful park scene in honor of the park's reopening, at least for the time being, for passive recreation. So in order to draw this scene, I'm going to split our canvas up into 4 quadrants or 4 squares. I'm going to draw a line down the center and a line through the middle. You want these lines to be light because we don't want them to show up. This is just to help us place the items. So this pathway, that is mostly in this bottom right quadrant. So the edge of the path basically comes the center line, and then it does an S shape around, and then the corner of the path meets with the corner of the quadrant. And we're going to draw another S shape, and then this one is also going to extend out to the edge of the quadrant, and then let's give it a border. It's got this nice stone border around the brick. This is bricks here. Okay, so we got this quadrant. Then let's start working on this top quadrant. I'm using a number 2, well, you should use a number 2 pencil at home. I'm using a slightly thicker pencil right now so you can see the lines a little bit better. But you want these lines to be pretty light because we're just using them as a guide. Okay, so I have my path sketched out. Let's start drawing this gazebo. I'm going to start with the roof because I think I made my path a little bit too big. So I want my roof to start identifying it. So first thing, we have this little cupola at the top. So we have a series of triangles. So this is a true triangle here. Okay, then we have this small piece of wood that's got some windows in it. So if we just draw the straight lines like I'm doing now, those symbolize the windows to let the air flow through. And then I'm gonna go and draw our roof shingles. We're gonna have lines going straight across, and then we're gonna add lines up here. Okay, so we have the roof of our gazebo done. Let's add in the beams. So this is going to follow the roof. Now, as you can see, I was correct that we made the path a little too wide. And the beautiful thing about sketching this out ahead of time is that we can erase it easily. When you're working with the colored pencils, it's going to be difficult to erase. So we want to figure out, especially the gazebo, since that's one of the focal points of this drawing, we want to have that figured out before we start sketching anything in more detail. Path is probably going to follow this line that I drew in to separate our quadrants, and then this is going to be much thinner. Gonna pass right by our little seating area and then connect with the larger S that we already drew. And the reason this part is so thin and this part is so thick, even though it's the same road and in reality it's going to be at least the same thickness all the way through, is because of our perspective. It's kind of hard to see up close, so let me take a step back That looks pretty close to my original. It's not gonna look exactly. This I want to shift over a little. I feel like it's going a little this way. If you want a really straight edge, you can use a ruler while you're doing this. Okay, so we have our gazebo established. We have our path established. Now for this bottom left corner, we're gonna focus on the bench. We'll do our rectangle. Now, you notice that part of the bench is cut off and part of the path is cut off by this big bush. So let's try putting in this bush here. That's gonna come basically through the middle. This tree is basically at the center line of our drawing. So we want the bush to go through this. It hits right in the middle of the S of our path. The bush should go around there. We can erase our path and our bench. Add in armrests. I like the curly Q of this armrest. Makes it a little bit more fun and whimsical. We're gonna have the curly Q in the back of the bench as well. And then the legs. Let's sketch out the rocks. Now you can draw your favorite park. We'd love to see your favorite places. Let's start sketching some of these bushes. Now our horizon line is further above from the center line. It's almost like 3/4 of our page. It should align with the edge of the gazebo sitting area that we drew before. So our horizon line is about here. And as you can see, things are starting to take shape. It's starting to look more like a scene. Alright, so I have a tree coming out here. I have another tree over here. I don't want to be too detailed with the tree because I want to have room to draw all of these leaves and flowers with our colored pencil directly, so I'm going to leave that pretty loose. Let's get rid of this quadrant line here. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is let's start doing this brick. So I'm going to add, I'm using a brick red color for our path. You can choose any colors that you want. This could be brown, it could be gray. If you want it to be Wizard of Oz theme, you could make it yellow brick road. Whatever color scheme you want. I like the deep red for the brick because it's gonna be a nice contrast to our pink flowering trees. This is really up to you. We just want it to be the color of bricks, so it could be tan too, or orange. You have a lot of options. Now to help make this look like brick, I actually drew a brick pattern over the color, but actually before we do that, let's go ahead and color the stone border gray. You can use your number 2 pencil for this. That way we'll have our base coat done, so when we add our detail work next, we're ready to go. Okay, so we added our colors. Now the border is a little simpler. because we're just putting lines across. We want the lines to be closer together, farther away, and further spaced as they come towards you, because it's not that the bricks are getting bigger, it's just that they're getting easier to see because of the perspective. This is all perspective right here. Okay, now the bricks are a little bit different. I'm gonna have straight lines. We talked about this in some of our previous library drawing parties, particularly the bonsai one, where when it's closer to the center point, it's going to be closer together. So as we're drawing these lines, imagine that you're drawing them out from a center point. That way the width is wide at the bottom, but it's very small at the top. And now for the brick pattern, I'm going to draw horizontal lines so they're alternating like a real brick pattern. I would recommend whatever color you decide for the bricks though, to stay with that for the gazebo. We're using practically the whole rainbow to create this drawing. So to keep it from looking too busy, it's a good idea to stick with the same colors. So whatever you use for this, I would use for that. I also use that same color for the bench. So let me color in the bench. Now you hear me talking a lot about base coats and blending, but this color is exactly the color that I want to use. So I'm not going to worry about blending. I'm just going to go ahead and put the full force of the pencil down so we can get that nice natural brick red color. I am going to make sure that there is enough shading though. So these edges, I'm going to emphasize them a bit. Okay, now we have our gazebo drawn. I just want to clean up the edges again. I'm using our number 2 pencil. Give it a little bit of black. You could use a dark brown, a dark blue, or black. Okay, so our gazebo, we don't really have to do much to. And add some lines for the slats in our little seating area. I'm going to add a table here. But I'm going to leave that pretty open because we want to be able to have people walking through here. I'm going to emphasize our armrests. Emphasize the back of the chair. I imagine there would be wrought iron back here, so this is emphasizing our iron. The leg would also be made the same material as the railing or the hand rests, armrest. So we can go color that in. And let's start working on, let's work our way backwards with the vegetation. So I want to draw our daffodils. I did draw an in-depth close-up of daffodils previously, So if you want to make these daffodils a little more focused, you can always refer to that video. But for right now, I want them to be a little out of focus because they're relatively small. I mean, we have a huge gazebo. The daffodils are going to be much smaller compared to that. So we have leaves. I'm drawing them with a light green. Then I'm just going to draw in circles. To give the effect that there's daffodils, but I don't want it to be too focused, like I said. There you have the idea of daffodils. I'm going to give some shading, so I'm going to use dark green. Okay. Next, I'm going to work on this bush. So I'm going to use that same light green behind it. Now this is where you got to be careful because you have all of these daffodils and we don't want to lose them by coloring over them. So make sure you go around the daffodils. I'm doing them first so I don't accidentally color over them. Okay, and then I'm going to color in behind them. That's part of the reason why we use this darker green, so that it doesn't blend in with this bush here. You can still see those lines. Okay, now that we colored around our daffodils, let's fill in our bush. Our bush, we do want to layer the colors. So you can do it in a circular motion. And then we want a little bit of shadow behind the daffodils. So I'm using a darker green for the shadow. You're just going to draw some lines behind it. And then draw a couple of lines coming up. Give it a little bit more rounded effect. And then I have this gold that we use for the sand in our seascape. I'm going to put a little bit on the top to give it a highlight. Okay, so we have our first bush. Now let's do the rest of the bushes. These you can just draw a circle with your light green. You take your dark green. You're going to add some shading on the bottom. And again, you can use the gold to highlight the top. Gives it a little bit more depth, a little bit more character. Okay, so we have our bushes, we have our daffodils. Let's also take the gold to give it a little bit of dirt in the bottom. Alright. Then we have like this little fern thing here. But I'm going to come back to that because I want to put in our grass. Let's start over here. I'm imagining that if this were something that we walked into, like a real park, that the lawn would be cut in this direction. So I'm going to use horizontal lines, but you don't have to. You can make lines going up. You can make vertical lines, whatever direction you think the grass should be going in. I'm going to add a little bit of darker green for some character. As you can notice, I left some white. Did that on purpose. I'm going to add a little bit of gold. There's usually some yellow grass unless it's a perfect lawn. Okay, so we did this grass and then let's go and do the rest of it. Actually, before we do that, let's finish up our bench. I'm gonna use the gold for the dirt underneath. I do have a darker brown, so I'll put a little bit of dark brown in it for texture. And then I'm gonna use our number 2 pencil for gray to make the stones. Now these stones are circular, so I'm gonna make little circles around. Okay, so we have our bench. So let's go in and put the grass in. You do want to make sure that you have some white, somewhat for blending, and also somewhat to show that grass isn't flat. You want texture here. You can put the full force of the pencil because we want this dark light green color. But just make sure you're leaving room for white so you can add things as you go, like these little squiggles of dark green for the grass. Help give it some texture and keep it from looking too perfect. It's grass. No matter how hard we try, it's never going to be too perfect. Add some gold. I'm going to blend the gold in a little bit. Okay. Now we have this fern here. So I'm just gonna draw half circles. Show the fern coming out. Use the light green to draw more half circles. And then I'm gonna put a little bit of brown underneath it to show that it's in mulch. And use some gold too. You want to make sure when you draw your daffodils that you don't make them look like a sticker, that there's white all around it. You want it to be part of the painting. I noticed that in my colored pencil drawing that was looking like it was separate from the picture, so now I'm going to go in and add a little bit more background, and I think that looks a little bit closer. You can add sharper lines too to give it a little bit more definition. Okay, so we did our foreground, now we have to do the background. I would recommend doing the trunks of the trees first, and I'm going to use a light brown for that, and then I'll add dark brown for shading later on. I would do the trunks first because those are the lines that you really see, and then you can work on your branches. Your branches can go in any direction. As you can see, this one goes way off to the side. And then you have little branches. They almost look like fingers coming out. And this is supposed to be a forest in the background. So I have lots of little branches for trees that we can't even see. Okay. Now when I envisioned this picture, it was springtime. So I'm using pink for our trees. Show the flowers. That was one of my favorite parts of spring this year, was seeing all the beautiful flowers, especially on the trees. So I'm going to recreate that here. This one, I'm imagining the flowers to cascade down. So I'm drawing the lines going down. This one, I'm imagining them to feather out. So I'm drawing lines from the branches so that they're going up and out and away from the tree. And then there's gonna be some branches that we can't see. So I'm gonna make sure we have things feathering those directions too. Okay, and then this one in the background, this one had really light leaves. So I'm just gonna, this is called a stippling technique, where I'm just drawing dots, and the dots are there to symbolize the leaves and flowers of this tree. When you're far away, the dots, especially if the dots are close together, will appear to be connected and uniform and really showcase the tree. I'm doing this technique because I want there to be a lot of space between the flowers. Okay. Now I'm going to take our dark brown and highlight the trunks of the trees, or shade the trunks of the trees, I should say. And it gives that nice contrast to the pink that we're just using. Okay. This is an evergreen. It kind of looks like a cactus, but that's kind of how the tree was. So I'm going to draw my cactus evergreen in the background here. You can make the trees however you want. You can draw your favorite trees. Okay, now we have all these trees that are so far away, they're just really colors. I'm gonna draw that. They start in the gazebo, and then they branch out to our flowering trees. I'm using the gold to place the colors. This is going to go through the tree. Now, instead of white, you'll have this gold in the background. And let's take the light brown and add some vertical lines like trees. And I'm going going to take my dark brown and add some more vertical lines. Okay, and then finally, let's draw in our blue sky. So we want this to be a nice happy day that we can celebrate our time in the park. And you want to make sure you get in all of these white spaces so you can go right over the trees. I have a cloud in the background here. So you're going to add a cloud or two. And draw one over here too. And then this little piece right here. And there you have it. It's your park gazebo scene. Thank you for joining us in today's library drawing party. We hope to see you in more library drawing parties. We have them every Wednesday at 7 p.m. If you'd like to join us in previous library drawing parties, they're available on the Merced County Library System YouTube channel with lots of other great videos, including craft videos, music videos, and so much more. Thank you, and keep being creative.